Welcome, everyone. I am going to let our fabulous guests introduce themselves because I think that's always better than me butchering some type of introduction. But I'm super excited for today's talk. It is one of my favorite things, thinking about groups and conversations. Very, very excited. So for people who are new here, welcome. I put a little blurb in the chat. If you'd like a letter of attendance confirming that you came, please email me. My email's there. I'm happy to send that over. I know some of the licensures are still requiring letters to confirm virtual attendance, so I'm very happy to provide those. And also, please go see our website and join for free. You'll get all the newsletters coming out. We're currently solidifying our spring schedule, and there are going to be some great people also coming, including one workshop, so stay tuned. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Tetnowski, and if you'd like, you can definitely turn off your cameras and feel free to come back on when we have a Q&A after. But I will leave mine on so you can see me. All right.
Getting myself, there we go, current slide. Okay, so I am trying to remember to look here. You guys are on different screens, so excuse me if my gaze kind of shifts. And is the closed captioning going to bother anyone?
Looks great on my end.
Okay, awesome. It's just accessibility. So I'm Jennifer Tetnowski. I am an assistant professor at the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences Center. My research is more in qualitative methods, in aphasia, particularly my love of conversation analysis. And so that's what you guys will be seeing today. I don't expect that all of you are devotees of conversation analysis, so I will have some intro slides. Now, when we talk about group facilitation, it's more than just facilitating talk. So if you're going to facilitate group discourse, then you're also facilitating the members' engagement and something called group cohesiveness, which I'll expand on later. So you have to attend to not only the conversation facilitation through the strategies that you use, that you're modeling and you're reinforcing, you're allocating turns to manage the discourse. You're also developing the connectedness of that group through those conversation devices and other interpersonal behaviors. And you are constantly trying to create as authentic contacts as you can. And that's often through your topic selection, as well as through your conversation rhythms. And the topic trajectory and those conversation rhythms, they act as a feedback to you to let you know how your conversation is going. So let's talk about group cohesiveness. Some of you that are my age probably remember the commercial that would say, at so-and-so, we don't make the things that you buy, we make them better. It's a really old commercial, so I thought a great analogy for group cohesiveness is the sensor chips for cars that you can't get. So you're not, when you buy a car, you're not buying the sensor chip, but it's the sensor chip that kind of makes everything run smoothly. And that's what group cohesiveness does. So any of you guys that have read up about group psychotherapy, group counseling, Yalom is a pioneer. And so he talks about those 11 therapeutic factors, and group cohesiveness is one of them. And so it's basically, you know, the feeling of belongingness and value that members feel towards each other and towards the group. And so it's all the relationships, the member to you, members to each other, and members to the group as a whole. And you see that group cohesiveness as you're seeing increases in affiliation and engagement. People that do research into group cohesiveness have found that it's the strongest when it's a real group, as opposed to a group that was put together for psychology experiments. When it's a group that has high task commitment, So like a football team trying to win the national championship. And that task commitment actually is more important than how much people like each other. People think that, well, if I've got a group of people and if they really like each other, they're going to be cohesive. But actually, it's more important that there's a shared purpose. So group cohesiveness aligns very well with engagement. And so that engagement is that process through which we establish and we maintain our interactions. And it implies that there is engrossment in the process of what's going on. So prior research has already shown us that clinician conversation practices can support conversational competence and engagement through things like anticipatory completions, embedded corrections, clarification questions, topicalizers. So you're managing topic through things like front loading or framing, using intonation strategically, using other repetition, using affiliative statements, humor, shared laughter, and then we as facilitating clinicians employ a lot of nonverbal indicators that often kind of fly under the radar, but how we use our gaze, our body orientation, and gestures. So the first thing I'm going to do is throughout this presentation, I'm going to be trying to maintain a certain context for the data that you're viewing and the ideas I'm presenting. So to kind of kick us off to get started, there's about a 3 to 4 minute clip. And so again, I'm going to kind of help front load your shared knowledge. So the things that the group already knows up to this point is that Alan, not his real name, Alan's dog had an unplanned pregnancy and was going to have lots of puppies. Another thing they share is all of the Acadiana culture, which kind of takes pride that they can make gumbo out of anything. Squirrel, possum, roadkill. They also have already in the past talked about some Easter traditions when they were little, of getting live chicks and little bunnies as Easter presents. And then lastly, there was a previously shared humor story that Iris, not a real name, her family once made spaghetti out of some Easter rabbits. So they had made rabbit spaghetti, not gumbo. So here we go. Let me know if you can't hear it.
Oh, no way, you baby.
Talk to the bird.
What kind of bird do you have?
Cockatoo.
I used to have 2 of them.
25 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
Mine were like 2 years old and they started laying eggs and I got rid of them. I don't know. I thought they were both boys and.
Well,
and my sister was scared of them. She lives with me. She was scared of them. She didn't help me clean. So
That's it.
I gave her.
You had birds.
You had some birds?
25 years.
What kind?
Big female, and they had 2 babies.
They did. Was it lovebirds or?
Yeah. I had I see that. Yeah, the babies got older. They had some more babies.
Oh yeah.
It's all babies.
Sort of like dogs.
What?
Sort of like dogs.
Yeah. Yeah, some more babies. I don't know. You got to.
Did you sell them?
Yeah.
Yeah. She made some money. I just gave mine away.
Now some more babies. Yeah. That go up and the baby they had, they go up. I gave them away. Look again. I said, my baby. I said, oh no, you got to go. You got to go. I gave for 35 years. Got to go. Got to go. Yeah, you got to go. Yeah, 25 years and you gonna be in the bed. Oh no, you got to go. Oh yeah, you got to go. You know.
Gumbo.
Take care.
Gumbo. Gumbo.
Gumbo.
Put your birds in the gumbo.
Oh no.
The Easter, with the rabbit spaghetti.
Spaghetti rabbit, yeah, yeah. They had them at least, but it's almost 2 years now. One of them finally died. Those little rabbits and stuff, those pet rabbits and stuff. Oh, they had fun with them. But they didn't eat these, you know.
Yeah.
But, oh, yeah. We used to get around Easter when I was young, they bring those little purple little chicks. Yeah. That was always, they always used to have a little chick. Yeah. You know, every Easter and stuff. And I always had purple. I hate purple. Oh, I always had the purple, you know, but they die on my guess, you know, and they never survive.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask
You
if they
know,
live
yeah,
long. So
Yeah.
do they just like dunk the whole
I
thing?
played with them. I might be like 3 of them, maybe 3 or something. I always had my little chick, you know, kill them. It was like a pet, but it's not.
Yeah.
But you used to that.
That's how my family first got started with chicken.
Okay, so I don't know if you guys caught that last bit of humor where she said I'd play with them, but I'd kill them. The other thing, like when this is posted on YouTube, so I'm going to say really quickly now, auto caption is horrible when it comes to capturing what persons with aphasia say and people in general, because I'm reading this auto caption and know that his birds were not poisoned. They were both, he thought they were both boys. And so anyway, going from there. So before we get into looking at the devices and the practices that the clinicians engaged in to facilitate the discourse as well as manage that group consciousness, I wanted to kind of go over some conversation analysis terms and some symbols that you're going to see so things will make sense. So some of the terms are turn construction unit, and that's how you construct your turn, but it is the smallest possible unit before a turn could change. At that point where the turn could possibly change, that's called the transition relevance place. And we as listeners, we can tell when a transition relevance place is coming up through the speaker's intonation, as well as our knowledge of syntax and how turns are constructed. So those will come into play when we talk about overlap and continuers and interruptions. So then when I talk about turn allocation, there's 3 forms that it can take. You as the speaker can self-select to continue talking at that transition relevance place. Someone else can self-select and they can initiate a turn. Or at that transition relevance place, you as the speaker can allocate someone else to take a turn. And that's something we as therapists do a lot to bring people into the conversation, to create that discourse equality, that equal opportunity to participate in discourse. When we talk about trouble source, that can be either, it's a breakdown in either meaning, such as like a semantic paraphasia or a word finding problem, and then also a breakdown in the forward movement of the conversation. And so we often then engage in practices that will repair, help restore meaning, or help restore the forward movement or progressivity of that conversation. So when we're looking at transcripts, when you see an arrow, that's where I'm trying to draw your interest. It's like, that's the thing I'm talking about. The rest is important context, so you'll understand what it means. Frequently people, what they are saying overlaps, and actually that's a good thing when it's brief. So you'll see brackets where there have been simultaneous or overlapping utterances. Sometimes you'll see both, but sometimes I've left the other off if it doesn't relate to the point that I'm making. When one speaker ends and the other begins without any kind of perceptible pause, that's called latching. And so you'll see that equal sign. When you see the double hash mark, though, that's where someone has started talking mid-turn construction unit, as opposed to that transition relevance place, and that's an interruption. When someone has a very small pause, you'll see a dot, but if you see a number between two parentheses, that means that it was a lengthier pause, and that's the actual length of the pause. When you see arrows up and down, that marks an intonation pattern change, inflected up or inflected down. However, question marks will do the same thing. If someone's using a questioning inflection, you'll see a question mark. It doesn't mean they're asking a question. It just means they use a question type of inflection. Same thing with periods. The period's not used the way we use it when we're normally writing. It's meant to use that ending falling intonation the way that statements usually have, like I just did. When you see double parentheses, you'll see information in there that is the nonverbal information. So it's something that I say description of events not easily, left it off, but primarily I'm using that to convey gaze patterns, gesture patterns, any kind of positioning patterns. Okay, so I am the queen of packing way too much in. So we'll get through what we can. So these are the strategies and conversation practices that we saw. And so a lot of them, they align with what other researchers have found. But was really nice is we were able to see how they used those and what the effect was. So they used acknowledgement tokens pretty consistently. And I felt like member participation and topic, they kind of drove how much acknowledgement token was used. Continuers, you can see a decreasing pattern there. They were initially used to encourage participation. They were used to actually discourage or suppress self-initiation of someone else when a person with aphasia was needing more time and had those pauses. But you can see as the semester progresses and we share more knowledge, there's shared background knowledge, more shared knowledge of people's conversation styles and people learning to use strategies. We don't need those continuers as often. The clinicians were using them less. The clinicians in general, these two sessions, these were 2 at the front of the semester, 2 at the back. Full disclosure, these 2 are me. So it's a clinician that's been doing this for years, shares more cultural and life experience knowledge with the participants. And then the final 2 are student clinicians. And so the 2-7 is an anomaly. It was the session right after the Super Bowl and it was the year that there were all these fabulous Super Bowl commercials. And so that was the topic for almost the whole 19 minutes of conversation. The length of these is approximately the same. And so, yeah, so you see far fewer continuers needed. And let's see, but I'm doing a lot of mimicking, rephrasing, repetition. A lot of that, again, is topic driven, but you see much more, even if we average those out, we see more other repetition and gestural mimicking towards the latter sessions, and you'll see what that looked like. So we consistently use pauses, and I'll talk later about the functions they served, consistent with the positive contingent responses that are they form a natural part of conversation, but we as clinicians exploit them to provide immediate feedback on competent and positive verbal expression or gestural expression by our persons with aphasia. Proxy turns, you can see that we didn't need them as much at the end of the semester. And I'll talk more about those. Same with verifications, you didn't need them as much. We see the amount of agreements used going way up, and that represents affiliation. Same thing with assessments, self-assessment and self-evaluative language, as well as assessments to other people's, the content of other people's talk. We see anticipatory completions. They're used consistently, but there's going to be a change in the function that they served, and I'll talk about that later. Fairly consistent multimodality turn construction. Same thing with the topic management. This is one of my favorite things, the turn allocation pattern changes. So this is either the first session, and I'm doing a lot of discourse management work to promote discourse equality, to bring people into the conversation. And that's kind of continuing on the next week, but part of that then is because everybody wants to talk about those Super Bowl commercials, I'm trying to make sure I'm limiting interruptions, and I'm again drawing in those people that need more support to initiate a turn at talk. But by the end of the semester, there was far less turn allocation work being done, and it wasn't needed. Because you also see, I'll relate to that overlap, how you can see that on average, if we average the first two and average the second two, there's more overlap in conversation, which meant that the conversation was moving forward. There wasn't many haltings, and that overlap is also a sign of affiliation. Same thing with humor. We see a dramatic increase in episodes of humor. So let's, before we dive in, does anybody have a quick question?
You can feel free to put them in the chat too, if people don't want to unmute or can't unmute.
Okay, I'm gonna dive on in then. So first of all, there were those acknowledgements, and then which you see at the top here, and then the continuers, and there needed to be less continuers. So the functions of these were they demonstrated, the clinician used these to demonstrate their understanding of what the member was saying. Also, they demonstrated their engagement. They're used to encourage the person with aphasia to continue their turn at talk, but also, when I was looking back at the data, it also served to discourage other members from self-selecting during a transition relevance place, just in case that person wasn't done with what they wanted to say, as well as mid-turn construction unit when there would be some pauses. So Odd, not her real name, context here, she used to get recorded letters from family from another country. And she said, so my mother did something I really appreciated after I moved over here. And so during that, I'm nodding. It's like, and that's encouraging her. It's like marking that, yeah, I know you're still talking. Would make up, and again, I do the same thing, cassette tape, and tell me all about, so here someone overlapped. I didn't put it. All about, oh, that's where it should be. Ah, sorry. So our overlap, it should align better. The overlap is an assessment by Charlotte. Aww. All about what was happening in her every day. And as she's approaching that transition relevance place right here, I'm nodding and talk about people I knew from when, and I'm nodding right there because I'm recognizing her signal that this is a device she's using to let us know she's still going when I used to be around. So this next one, gestural mimicking, again, to create context, you're going to have to watch. Still my favorite Super Bowl commercial, but it's quick. Oops, sorry, she's not supposed to have that one. Okay, so that's the commercial that we're referring to in this next segment. And so Jesse has global aphasia. He has difficulty with comprehension and expressive difficulty too. So his expression most often takes the form of gesture and just some stereotypical utterances. And so I say, there's that Great Dane. And of course, you can tell I'm expressive. And so I'm kind of imitating what's going on. There's that Great Dane looking at him with another bag of Doritos in his mouth. And then Jesse goes, hey, and he uses this gesture. I'm going to back up. He goes, hey, damn. And I said, it's a big dog. And he goes, huh. And so then I say, those Great Danes are huge. And so I'm mimicking his gesture there. And so it's basically, I'm affiliating with him and I'm acknowledging that he was successfully able through just gesture to tell me that was a really big dog in that commercial. So mimicking is the gestural counterpart to other repetition. And so we often use other repetition also to affiliate. So we're basically, imitating. And so in this example, they're imitating and referencing previous shared humor. And so you've got two excerpts here, so you can see the original humor. They're talking about what they would do if they won the lottery. The lottery jackpot had gotten up to something huge. And so Alan says, but I always told people at work that if I won the lotto, I would keep a job and I would keep my job, but I would just be a lot more difficult to manage. Okay, so then they're still talking about it. And says, well, maybe I'd finish school, but I'd probably be like you, a lot harder to manage. I would be like, how about instead of that paperwork, I give you, and so then Alan actually interrupts here at the pause, but you can see clearly it was not the end of Clinician's turn. So he interrupts here because he's so excited. Except the VP I was working with, she told me that, how would we know? And so what Clinician 1 does, though, he uses the same exact phrase, harder to manage or difficult to manage. And so learner shows us that other repetition is not necessarily exact imitation. It doesn't have to be right after. It can be sometimes delayed, but it does serve an affiliative function. Okay, so related to this then is also the rephrasing. And the clinicians use this both as a positive contingent response, but then also for verification and repair. So one of our participants, Althea, she initially it was pulling teeth to get her to participate. And over time, we see her level of participation go way up, and the number of turn allocations she needs go way down. But this is session 2 where I am, so I'm saying, what state did you go to? I bet you've been to Texas. Yeah, Texas. And so I'm rephrasing the Texas and the Texas there again to just double check that that's where she'd gone. And so then in session 4, same person, they use that rephrasing again. So they're rephrasing what they said. You had a good day. It's a good, yeah. It's nice, yeah. So they've rephrased themselves really twice. Okay, the clinicians also consistently used pauses. And I have to give a shout out here. I don't know if Marion Lehman or Brent Archer are on this call, but at ASHA, they had a wonderful presentation on using silence in groups. And I think it's undervalued. Great work. So here they're using pauses the first one to signal a topic shift. So it's actually me. So I say, those of you who have the early appointment anyway, you might as well come an hour early. And so I'm pairing my pause with a gesture to make it very clear that, okay, I'm done talking about that. How are you feeling? And I'm adding in gaze too. But we also used pauses to repair comprehension and with the rephrasing. So clinician 2 asks Jesse, do you have one of those, Jesse, where you can skip the commercials, where you record it? And he's pairing the gestures with that. Then let me back up, where you can record it and skip the commercials. And so particularly, this was probably the most powerful pause, where he's making sure that Jesse has a little extra time to process both the gestural information and the words, because Jesse needs it. Okay, I talked before about those positive contingent responses that are a natural part of conversation, but we kind of amp it up to demonstrate affiliation, understanding, agreement, and just its positive feedback for a successful conversation move by our participants. So clinician 3 is, you like surround sound? And Charlotte says, I do. And then Althea overlaps, yeah, you have to lower it. You have to lower it. So clinician 2 now is using that other imitation or other repetition as a positive contingent response. Oh, you have to lower the sound too. And so she's affiliating with the other repetition, but she's also expanding and rephrasing to then expand the Althea's turn and attribute that to Althea. So here's another one where we're extending her participation in conversation. And what that does is the more they're participating in conversation, the more they're promoting identity, renegotiation, and reclamation, as well as group affiliation. And so you actually saw this one on the video. C2, you had some birds, 25 years, what kind? So unfortunately, clinician interrupts there. Male and female, and they had some babies. Was it lovebirds or yeah. So we can see that clinician 1 is, through his responses, helping expand and kind of flesh out her turn. Okay, so they also used what I call proxy turns at talk. Because I want to contrast that from any speaking for behaviors. Because typically when we talk about speaking for behaviors, we're talking about caregivers that are, they're speaking for the person with aphasia, not necessarily facilitating the person with aphasia's self-expression or attributing that talk to that person. And so that's the key about the proxy, is that it's attributing authorship to the person with aphasia, which also provides the person with aphasia the ability to verify that that's the correct intended meaning or to revise it themselves. So here's an example of the proxy turnip talk. Right. So he was there, her grandson. You just hung out with, and she says, yeah, you just hung out with him. Yeah. And so here I say, and you're probably watching Sesame Street, kid shows on TV. Well, you know, what was great about this proxy turn, it gave her the opportunity to say, no, that's not what we do. You know, so she goes, I don't watch that. So she you know, she's able to reclaim that authorship and kind of correct a wrong that I've made. So we see an increase in agreements, and primarily it serves the function of affiliation. And so we see the topic is on the virtues of owning a DVR. And both Alan and the Clinician 3 are really passionate about their DVRs. So Alan says, I mean, fast forward that you, it's a science till you hit it just, and then she goes, yes. And he says, perfectly. And it starts the show. And then Iris goes in and says, oh, and she's also using nonverbal. So she's nodding. And then, I'm sorry, my goes, and it starts the show. And then Iris says, it's an art, huh? It's an art. So we can see how the clinician is both using verbal and nonverbal devices to agree as a form of affiliation. But sometimes it also can be used as part of humor or extending someone's humor. And in this case, I would maybe even stretch to say that depending on how you do the agreement, if you're using it with humor, you can actually kind of minimize what might be a dispreferred action. Because when they ask Aude, do you use this Aude, the DVR? She says, no, I don't. I'm picky what I watch. Okay, but you can picky and fast forward all the commercials. And so there's a bit of a tension or conflict there. And Clinician 2 says that might even make you pickier. So she's teasing a little bit, which kind of helps kind of soften it a little bit. And she's also agreeing with Ellen through the repetition. So the whole so I mentioned before about assessments and evaluative language, so that you can have self-assessments and self-evaluative language, and those are the words we use in our speech that convey how we feel about something. And then you can also have assessments of other people's talk. And so the Clinician 1, he's demonstrating a lot of self-assessments and using the evaluative language. And then we'll see how Charlotte actually then, his talk invites a second assessment, and that's what it was used for. So he uses this story and its assessment as a topic initiator, as well as an invitation to a second assessment. And we see this increase that really indicates, it's an indicator of cohesiveness, because using assessments and evaluative language, it presupposes a level of vulnerability. And so as you become more cohesive, you're a little bit less risk aversive. So he's talking about the wedding, and I don't know if any of you guys are from Louisiana, but Delcambre is like the shrimp capital of the South. So it smells, and he goes, oh, it smells like shrimp. It's like the bayou runs through, and Alan's overlapping, as a cohesive group will do. I know where it is. Well, it smells terrible. the wedding is like right off the little harbor. So here he's punctuating with his pauses. That's terrible, evaluating. It's outside, supposed to rain. And so when he says it's right off the little harbor, so Charlotte inserts, again, my alignment issue, inserts, ugh. So now she has contributed an assessment of that. Her speech is limited to I joke, or I do why. So the is great. It's a great contribution from her. And he goes on, I think rich picture there of how assessments and evaluative language, how they foster discourse participation as well as group cohesiveness. How are we doing on time? Oh gosh, I'm so sorry, guys. It's anticipatory completion, and that was both for promoting group cohesiveness and managing the discourse, particularly for repairs. So in this case, Odd constructs a perfectly wonderful turn at talk about those audio letters when she says, and that was really not just to hear the news, but to hear, and I overlap with an anticipatory completion, hear her voice. And so I know it's coming up because she's got a pattern here, not just to hear. And so I know when she says, hear the news, and she goes to hear, I know she's going to say, hear her voice. And so I'm demonstrating there, I understand you. I am tightly aligned with your message. I feel the same way. And that's what that anticipatory completion accomplishes. But here we see that Alan is inviting me through his question inflection into collaborative repair. So he says, and Maggie looks like a something, Peg, and then I go, Potbelly Pig, yeah. And so he's then latched on to be like, yep, let's keep moving forward. And here we have it also with Alan as an embedded repair. And so I asked him about the difference between Skype and FaceTime. You can tell this is back in 2012, and because it's iPhone 4. And he's saying, well, you know, if you're going to use FaceTime, you have to have an iPhone 4 or an iPad, right, to get FaceTime. True, cause it's an Apple. I mean, Apple. They protect their tech. I'm sorry, he pauses. They, and then I continue for him, protect their technology. And as soon as I get to tech, he verifies that that was the correct anticipatory completion that repaired. And again, this breakdown was a forward progressivity breakdown. So the anticipatory completion was meant to head off a dispreferred behavior, being conversation breakdown and potential loss of face because of the conversation breakdown. So they also engage in multi-modality turn construction. It's an article about junk art, this guy. And I love this quote: posture, gesture, facial expression, preceding talk, voice quality, and the like, all till the soil into which the words are dropped. The great Shegloff. So the clinician says the face looks the same, and she's pointing to that photo. Iris asks, where is that? And the clinician says, it looks as if he's making a smaller one. And then Iris says, but where did you get the article? And the clinician points to who brought the article. So she's using metaphorical gesture as well as deictic gesture there. So they also engaged in topic management practices. They initiated, maintained, as well as transition / closing when topics were winding down. And so here we see the clinician is transitioning the conversation. They were talking about how she has no hot water, And so she said, and so she can't wash her dishes safely. And so Althea is giving advice, which is a great way to get persons with aphasia engaged in the conversation, is ask an advice question. And so she's like, you have to, and she's talking about using paper goods. It comes in handy for me, because it comes in handy for me. And so Althea's repetition there, the clinicians interpreting that as, okay, so she's closing that conversation part. And so she transitions it. Yeah, probably during finals, especially, I'd appreciate that, huh? And she says, yeah. And so then she's like, well, hopefully we'll get that water heater fixed soon, but it's not fun. I missed the hot water. And so then she transitions to conveniences. So that's how she's using her turn to guide and steer the topics. So again, let's see, turn allocation. I'm going to skip ahead because we talked about the turn allocation, and humor is way more fun, and it was the pattern was so obvious as far as that increase in humor over time. And so the clinicians were really good. They would rely on the shared knowledge and previous episodes of humor when they were constructing their humor, whether it was conscious or unconscious, or just because of the group cohesiveness, it was very effective. So here they're referencing that Easter rabbit spaghetti and that problem of too many lovebirds. And so this begins where that video ended. Somebody gave us some colored ones. We had about 4 or 5 that survived. Half of them did live. They were all roosters. But so we got some hens after that. And Alan says, well, obviously, build a pen. And so this his humor, it wasn't very like affiliative, and so she manages that. And so by saying, and then we killed some for gumbo, to kind of bring it back into those previous humor episodes. Only once did a clinician use humor inappropriately, and so I'm going to jump to down, and then the client actually saves space for himself and the clinician, and then we see a different clinician use humor more effectively. So they're talking to Alan about his dog and his babies, and that they want pictures and that he should make a scrapbook. Alan always refers to himself as antisocial, but that doesn't mean you should be calling him antisocial, because clinician 1 says, we need to see who you communicate with, since you don't talk to us and you're not social. And a different member goes, oh, no, where do I? So she's calling him on the carpet right there. And then Alan says, I talked to the bird. So he's saved face for both of them. And then another clinician uses humor to kind of move it along. Does the bird talk back? So I love that episode. So you guys have been seeing overlap all the way through. I wanted to kind of tie it because I know I want to leave time to chat, because I love to chat. And so just lastly, why I love conversation analysis. It shows us how the clinicians support persons with aphasia in not only their conversational competence, but their identity reclamation, and how the clinicians build the engagement and the community among group members. But it also can show us clearly when the strategies or practices or even our personal style can become barriers to facilitating expression and that group cohesiveness. So thank you. Should I stop sharing or leave it up?
Let's leave it up for now in case anyone has questions related
Okay,
to specific
I'm going to
slides.
escape the screen share so I can get
Okay.
slides quicker.
You can see people. We've got some people from looks like New Orleans who are excited about some of those topics in the chat here. If anyone has a question, feel free to unmute, or you can drop it in the chat and I'm happy to read it aloud. I will just get started kind of on here while people are typing. What has been kind of the most surprising thing that you see in terms of kind of changes over time when you're looking at conversation in some of these individuals you work with? Like, you wouldn't have expected to see this as something that like dynamically changed, but that you've seen pretty consistently.
Two things really. The one is that, you know, as clinicians, we're often so focused on get them to talk more,
Yeah.
talking more is good. But in this group's case, where you had some people that had mild aphasia and others with severe aphasia, what was really gratifying and surprising was I actually saw a reduction in turns at talk for Alan, the person who had the mildest aphasia. And so that surprised me, and I was just like thrilled. And again, I feel like it speaks to the effect of group cohesiveness. The other thing that, and you and I will have to talk another time about that, because I know you've done some work in gesture.
Yeah.
Is in this group, there were 3 participants that I focused on most. But so in looking at those participants, and then actually looking at some literature on conversation groups, gosh, it was way back 1999 or maybe earlier. It's a Bollinger article that many people don't use the pica anymore. I like it. And I particularly like the gestural processing subtests. Well, my participants and their participants, they actually increased their scores for gestural processing, which is telling me that situating treatment in an authentic context, such as conversation, where we don't practice gesturing, we just we model gesture and we reinforce their use of gesture through those positive contingent responses, which encourages more gesture. So everybody's gesturing more often. All the participants increase their use of gesture throughout the sessions. The clinicians increase their use of gesture, and at the end, gestural processing also increased. So I'm thinking there's a reciprocal relation there that relationship there that needs to be like really plumbed.
That would be fun. We should definitely talk. Julianne, who is also in my lab, she was asking, did you take into account differences between your sessions and those of student clinicians? And, you know, did that affect the conversations? I know you mentioned this a little bit, but maybe you could chat a bit more about maybe how that's used as like a training component as well.
Right. So yeah, if I could repeat this whole thing over again, I would probably have, you know, chosen sessions that were, I would either have chosen sessions that began the initial sessions were clinician-led sessions, or insert myself again in there at the end, have more sessions and insert myself again at the end to really get a nice kind of contrast there. So I mentioned before that I have got more shared knowledge because of my age with the participants, but then also I'm likely to use more devices than the clinicians, but these are also were the first sessions. So there was a lot of turn allocation work that had to be done, just because these were like this was a group that didn't know each other.
Right.
Were new to conversation therapy. And so I feel like even when we look at topic management, you know, we end up going through these rhythms of until we hit on a good topic that has uptake by the group. how we're doing a lot more micromanaging. We're talking more than maybe we want to be. We're doing more turn allocation, whereas once we hit on that mutual interest topic, then we're able to kind of sit back and let the topic and the conversation, it drives itself. And you're just there to smooth things out.
Yeah, that makes sense. Roberta Brooks has a great question here, and this is probably very helpful for others. Besides your own videos, she says, which are great, are there other resources you found are helpful in training others in conversation analysis? So if you have any favorite resources.
Oh, for conversation analysis. There's I mean, I guess, you know, there's some great books out there. Trying to think. Of course, you know, when you're asked right away, then your mind just goes.
Yeah, you're on the spot. We'll have her email some too.
And I will definitely be able to hit on the really good ones. But Charles Goodwin, great. Atkinson and Heritage are great researchers. I want to say Eggins, Tannen. There's a lot of great ones. I don't know of like a one-stop shop place, but happy to share resources.
Yep, and we will. Oh yeah, I'll ask her if she has any good videos.
And anybody
as well.
else, feel free to put in the chat what they like.
There you go.
I love groupthink.
Tom asked, have you thought about studying conversation groups being led by individuals with aphasia without any clinicians in the room?
Every single day. I love that. In fact, there's Brielle and I have a shared person that we were talking about earlier. And she is someone with aphasia that will be slowly kind of taking, you know, or co-leading the aphasia support group. When I was living in Louisiana, and I'm going to give a shout out here to the Aphasia Center of Acadiana. It's founded and run by Rose Schuff. And when we have our monthly group meetings, it's facilitated by Rose Schuff. And so, yes, I think it's a powerful mechanism to have conversation groups that are led by persons with aphasia. And I do want to do more and more of that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Perfect timing, 1 p.m. It has been great to host Dr. Tetnowski. If you have any questions for her, feel free to shoot her an email. I'm sure she's very game to chat more. And I will be posting this on YouTube soon, and we'll put some resources up there too. But thank you all for joining. It was great, and I hope to see you all back at our next event. Thanks so much, Jen. See y'all later.